and welcome to Senior Moments. This is a show on C19. It is a broadcast service of Cleveland Community College on Spectrum Cable, and it is a show all about the senior citizens' activities, events, and organizations in our community. I hope that you enjoy watching the show. I am Jackie Sibley Newton from Brookdale Assisted Living, and I'm your host today. Today, our guest is Brenton Begley. And Brenton, you're with McIntyre Elder Law.
That's correct.
And we have had the privilege of seeing a couple of your seminars and having you in our community to talk with our residents. But tell us a little bit about exactly what is elder law.
That's a great question. As you can imagine, we get that question all the time. Our firm's name is McIntyre Elder Law, and a lot of times people think that elder is the other partner in the law firm, but actually elder law is the type of law that we focus on. So elder law is all about planning for the future. Because, I'm aware of risks that people face as they age with respect to their money, their property, right? These hard-earned things that took a long time to build up, like a savings, an IRA, life insurance policies, a home, things like that. So there are certain risks to those assets, if you will, that we want to make sure we protect from. And so that's what we focus on for our clients.
So elder law is specifically for people who are planning for their future, not necessarily just senior citizens. Anyone who has assets probably wants to secure that and get that in good hands before they even get to that point where decisions need to be made.
That's absolutely correct. We do estate planning and elder law. Really, estate planning is all about making sure you have the tools in place to, decide what happens after you pass away with your assets, that sort of thing. But we all age, and hopefully we're all going to get to a point where we can retire, where we can, have a good retirement and live the rest of our lives. But, we hopefully can reach that point. And if we do, we have to understand that the earlier we plan, the easier it's going to be to enjoy that retirement and not have to worry about the risks that we all do face as we age.
Another big thing probably is that planning piece, because I know when I helped my mom secure her long-term care insurance, when we secured that, she was like, I'm never going to use that. I'm going to stay in my home.
Right.
It's like, well, we don't know as we age. So getting those things in order and starting that conversation early is always best for you as an individual, no matter what your age, so that you know exactly what to plan for.
Yeah, you ought to know the options.
Right.
Long-term care insurance is an amazing thing because it can be used to keep someone in home, pay for in-home care, facility care, that sort of thing. It's a really good tool. And so that's a really good example of, if you know what the options are, you can decide earlier what that would look like in the future, because we can't picture ourselves. We're relatively young, right?
We're going to pretend like I am.
You look young to me. So, I'm sure it's hard for you to imagine being in a position where you're not self-sufficient, where you don't rely on yourself, where you're at a point where you do need help, or you need someone to come into the home, or maybe even need some type of facility care. That's a hard thing to imagine for any one of us, even if we are past a certain age. I have a lot of clients who may be, considered to be elderly, but they're very lively, very spunky, very, maybe even physically quite well. But doesn't mean that can't change very quickly.
Exactly.
But it's hard for us to imagine that. So to take the time with a professional to really sit down and understand what the options are and what that looks like for a lot of people who are in that unfortunate position, it helps paint that picture. So you do it, you rip the Band-Aid off, you make that plan, you don't have to think about it anymore.
Exactly. And neither does your family.
That's right.
Because the worst case scenarios are something's happened and now we're in crisis mode.
Right.
And we're trying to figure out, we don't even know if mom has a will. We don't know if she has a living will. We don't know if she has, where her property value is. We don't know any of these things, and now we're trying to figure this out. That takes that burden off your family.
Sure. Yeah, the old saying goes, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So, what your family is doing in that instance is they're coming in at the last minute to try to help out. And you're exactly right, they're in crisis mode. If you're in crisis mode, that means that things can fall through the cracks. That means that you're not prepared by definition if you're in crisis mode. So
Exactly.
preparation is key, because if you are prepared, now we help with crisis mode, okay? We see a lot of people in crisis mode.
I'm
There's a lot
sure.
that can still be done if you are in crisis mode. But we want folks to never be in that.
Exactly.
And not only is it a rush for the family to come in and try to help, but it can also cause a lot of problems. Like, you have one family member who tries to step in, take over. They may even do something that's in the best interest of their mother, father, whoever. But if the other siblings, let's say, don't understand what's going on, there's not good communication, that could cause future litigation. And that's something we deal with as well. I mean, families fight, you know, and the best way to keep families from fighting is to, you know, prepare ahead of time, tell everybody what's going on, tell everybody the plan, so that it's copacetic.
Right. But just telling everybody the plan isn't necessarily going to fix the problem before it
Sure,
becomes a
sure.
problem. And that's where elder law really comes in, as everything is lined out. Am I reading that right?
Right. So what we try to do is we try to put tools in place and then put some sort of structure and understanding of what the next steps would be going forward. So let me just give you an example. If someone comes into my office, I know that if they don't have any estate planning at all, they need at least a few things to make sure they're in a good position.
Right.
So one of the main things that we recommend, you know, that anybody have is powers of attorney, both financial and healthcare power of attorney, a living will, and a last will and testament. These are not only designed to protect the individuals that, you know, come in as our clients, they're not only designed to ensure that they have some choice over their assets, they're also designed to make sure that the family falls in line and understands what's supposed to happen. So,
Right.
you know, in a power of attorney, you're naming somebody to act on your behalf as if they were you for legal, financial, healthcare purposes.
Right.
So that if you can't do it any longer, if something were to happen, you can't do it any longer, someone can step in and make those decisions. Now, the person who's named, that's the person you've picked to, you know, run point, essentially the quarterback on the field.
Yes.
And as long as everybody knows that, is okay with that, that's a big deal, because they know, hey, if mom, dad, you know, grandma, grandpa, if they get in a position where they can no longer act, we know who's going to step in and help out.
And take that. And
That's
then
right.
there is really no fighting. There may be fighting, but it's all done legally and already
Sure.
been established.
Yeah.
And I know people sometimes get really afraid when they start to say, okay, I'm going to name this person my power of attorney. But I don't know that they fully understand that that person doesn't make decisions for you as long as you're capable of making your decisions.
Right. I love this point. I'm glad you brought it up, because a lot of people are super freaked out by naming someone as a power of attorney. Some people, in fact, think that they're giving away their own ability to choose for themselves if they sign a
Exactly.
power of attorney. That's totally not true. So if you're naming someone to act on your behalf as power of attorney, they're doing exactly that, acting on your behalf, at your behest, right? So you can, you know, revoke that power of attorney at any time. You can change that power of attorney at any time. And ultimately, they have a duty to act in your best interest. And so, you know, if you give them the permission to, they can act while, you know, you're still of, you know, sound mind. However, typically the idea is that they're not going to step in until you can no longer make the decisions for yourself.
Exactly. And we work with families all the time that are either they don't have a power of attorney,
Right.
and in assisted living, and then if they go on to skilled nursing or they need other care, that is very important, because they never know at what point they might not be able to make a decision for themselves. And the real big fear is, well, they're going to make decisions for me, and
Right.
I want to have control of that.
Sure.
So we try to encourage them. You actually do still have control as long as you're able to make those decisions.
Right. And, you know, it's kind of a scary thing to think about, but it's important to understand that, you know, if someone has dementia, has a stroke, something like that, you know, cognitive capacity is really on a spectrum. It's hard to assess someone's mental capability and understand at what bright line point that they're no longer able to make decisions for themselves, right? So by definition, a power of attorney really needs to be put in place long before an individual is suffering from diminished capacity.
Exactly. Don't wait for a diagnosis of anything.
Right.
Set that when you are able to fully understand what you're doing.
Right, and here's one of the benefits too of having that power of attorney in place, even if it's a little bit scary to have something like that. Number one, you got to name somebody that you trust. A lot of people name their spouse as their primary, what they call an agent under power of attorney. Hopefully you trust your spouse. So a lot of people name maybe a spouse and then a child, maybe the oldest child as a backup.
Yeah.
Not a popularity contest, by the way. So you can name whoever you want
Exactly.
to. They need to be sophisticated enough to do the job. Okay, but don't name somebody just because you think they might get angry if they're not picked, right? Because
Right.
you're not leaving them out of the will, you're just not picking them as someone who's going to act on your behalf, balance your checkbook, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why we encourage having power of attorney in place is also prevent, guardianship, which is a big deal. Something that I'm glad to have a platform to talk about, because guardianship is a very scary thing in the state of North Carolina. If you have somebody who doesn't have a guardian or a power of attorney, and no one can make decisions for them if they don't have a power of attorney. If their diminished capacity cannot make decisions for themselves, then what happens? Well, you got to have someone appointed to make a decision for them. The court does that. So essentially what the court is doing is taking away that person's rights, picking someone to act on their behalf. Can be a family member, could be the state. Okay.
Exactly.
So that's something that, we all need to be aware of whenever we're doing some type of planning to try to prevent something like that from happening in the future.
Well, we're going to take a quick break.
Sure.
And we'll come back and talk more about elder law.
There are so many positive things that are happening in Cleveland County. It's too hard to keep up with, and that's what Community Spotlight is all about. Hi, I'm Tyra Silvers, and I'd love for you to join me every other week right here on C19 TV, where we learn about the good folks and organizations that make our county such a special place. So drop in on us at Community Spotlight, only on C19 TV and online at c19.tv.
Welcome back to Senior Moments. I am Jackie Sibley Newton, your host, and we've been talking with Brenton Begley of McIntyre Elder Law. And we've talked a little bit about the importance of establishing what you want to happen as you get older and things might happen, just
Sure.
to be prepared. What kind of risks do elderly people face as they start to age?
Sure. So, the main thing that we're worried about as attorneys is risk to money and property. Two main things that we've identified as the biggest risks. Number one, long-term care. Over 70% of individuals who make it past retirement age will need some type of long-term care, whether that is in-home, assisted living, or skilled nursing care. So it's important to understand that, percentage of people at risk, that 70% risk, because any one of us has, a 70% chance of paying $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to pay for care. So that's a huge one.
Yeah.
Number two, probate. So probate is, a default process that happens when someone dies and has stuff, right?
Right.
Got to get it to the heir somehow. So the court is the entity that helps that happen. And if the court's involved, then you got to go through their process. And part of that process is inviting people to make claims against the estate. So if there is nursing home bills, if there are long-term care bills, they can come after the estate through the probate process. So one of the things we want to do is plan for the cost of long-term care and try to help people avoid probate with the assets to avoid that long, expensive, difficult process where a creditor can come take a piece of that estate before it ever gets to the heirs.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense because you don't anticipate having hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills.
Right.
Or any other kind of asset, asset endangerment of
Right.
that sort. So trying to be mindful of, one, what you're going to need to have to spend,
Sure.
and two, how to protect what you have, because people have worked really hard their whole lives for what they have.
Absolutely,
So they want to
have,
protect it.
and especially the people that I see every day are incredibly hardworking, salt of the earth people who just want to protect what they've earned.
Exactly.
And what my advice is to make sure that you do it in a way where you're not giving up control of what you have, where you still have independence. You're not giving away your home to your children. You're not giving away your money to your children, your vehicle, where you can keep that in your name, under your control for the rest of your life, and still avoid these risks that I'm talking about. That is possible.
Now, what kind of documentation should people be gathering? What's the important things to put in your lockbox or your fireproof safe? What kind of things do people need to have in order?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier a few documents. Any estate plan, just like a good building, is built on a firm foundation. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to have what we call the foundational documents in place. And what we've identified as an individual's foundational documents are the general durable power of attorney, also known as financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, living will, and last will and testament. So having those in place is really going to set that foundation for you to allow you to make decisions going forward. So if you do incur any type of long-term care costs or run into any type of issues in the future, you have a place from which you can, operate. You have a firm foundation from which you can operate. Then we can look at maybe is a trust right for you. Maybe we can do deed work for the property, something like a ladybird deed to keep the property from going through probate and protect your house, things like that.
Okay. And when they come to see you, do they need to have some of these documents, or that's what you're there for? You're going to get these documents together for
Sure.
them.
Some people have, powers of attorney that they, got from another attorney, maybe, a will or something like that. So any previous estate planning documents that an individual has, I encourage them to bring them on in and have me take a look. It's a free consultation, so I'm happy to take a look at what they have just to make sure it's adequate for them, make sure it's tailored for them, and to make sure it actually works, if a loved one needs to get them long-term care or, get them qualified for something like Medicaid. There's really specific rules there that not all powers of attorney cover, for example. So we want to make sure that the necessary things are in those foundational documents, even if they already have them. Bring them on in. I'd love to take a look.
Will you also look at long-term care policies and explain to them what that covers?
Absolutely. Now, I'm not a certified financial planner. I'm not an insurance agent, but I'm good at reading legalese, as you can imagine. So, and I've seen a lot of long-term care policies. I've had, a lot of conversations with financial planners, insurance agents, and really try to flesh out how these things work. So I really enjoy looking at those policies and letting someone know what they're paying for. Sometimes, they've had it for years.
They think they're getting coverage for a
Sure.
certain thing, and then it turns out maybe it was just if they go into a certain level of care.
Yeah, or, there's something called an elimination period, which the insurance policy doesn't kick in and start paying until, on average 90 days. So that's, 3 months in a facility, $10,000 a month. It could be $30,000 that they pay out of pocket before the insurance policy ever kicks in. That's important to know if you're trying to use that insurance policy.
Yeah, you've got to be able to cover that first if
Yes.
that's what's going to be the case. So what do you recommend people do as their very first step? They're going to make an appointment for a consultation with you.
Sure.
What's going to be the recommendation for that very first step?
So let me tell you what I ask. The first question I ask when someone sits down, across from me, other than how can I help you? Usually, if we're doing some type of estate planning, I ask them what they own. what assets they have, you know? And then we go through it. We go through bank accounts. We go through real property, which is like land and a home, you know? We go through personal property, whether that's bank accounts, whether that's cars, things like that, life insurance policies, whatever you have is going to be really helpful for me to know, because if you have that list, I can tell you exactly what it is you need to put in place to make sure those things are protected, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is protect the assets and preserve, you know, that person's independence and ability to control those assets.
And a lot of terms that we've talked about, people may not understand what that is. The ladybird deed,
Sure.
the durable power of attorney. They may not understand exactly what those are. What does a ladybird deed do? What does that
Good
protect?
question. So main thing that a ladybird deed does is keeps a piece of real property. Okay, so real property means dirt and anything permanently affixed to the dirt, right, that
Okay.
you own. So not a vehicle, you know, so a home and land. It keeps it out of probate. But here's the thing, a lot of people want to avoid probate. They know that already, that it's important. So they'll just like give their kid their house and just deed it to them. If you do that, you don't have control over the home anymore. It's no longer yours. So, you know, if that child gets sued, gets divorced, goes bankrupt, or God forbid passes away before you, then there goes the house, right? And, you know, you might trust your child. They might not sell the house up from under you, but, you know, if they're married, then, you know, you didn't raise that spouse, right?
Right.
You know, you have no control over what they're going to do. So, you know, you're putting your home, your hard-earned property, into someone else's control, and that's never a good thing. So
Right.
with a ladybird deed, we want to accomplish two things. Avoid probate so that nursing home, Medicaid can never come after that home, okay? And then number two is make sure that it stays in that person's name, under their control for the rest of their life. That's what the ladybird deed allows people to do with their property.
And a living will. What's the difference in a living will and there's some other terms
DNR.
out there, DNR?
Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
difference there?
So DNR is do not resuscitate. That's something you request at like a medical facility saying, hey, look, don't take any medical intervention on my behalf to try to
Including
bring me
CPR.
back. Yeah,
Like, can't
don't
do
do
anything.
CPR, which makes sense. You know, if you're 128 years old and super frail, you know, you don't want someone doing CPR on you
No.
breaking, you know, ribs or anything like that. It
Right.
might put you in a worse state than what you could have been.
Exactly.
So, but that's a pretty extreme measure to request. Okay, so what a lot of people actually want is a living will. So a living will is simply a declaration for your desire to die a natural death. So you're saying, look, hey, if I'm terminal, incurable, past the point of no return, it's okay to go ahead and let me go. I don't want to be kept alive by virtue of machines, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm in a persistent vegetative state, lights are on but nobody's home, right? You can go
Yeah.
ahead and let me go. And I'm going to make this decision for myself. I'm not going to have my family members burdened with that decision. It's
Yeah.
a very tough decision to make. I wouldn't want to have to make it for anyone else. I wouldn't want anyone else to make it for me. So it gives you the power to make it and declare that decision beforehand.
And you can be pretty specific with those.
Sure, yeah.
With, I don't want to be put on a ventilator, but I do want these life-saving measures taken. You
Sure,
can be
yeah.
really
like,
specific.
Absolutely. And you can say, keep me comfortable. I don't want to have pain. Ensure my dignity, things like that. But I don't want to be, you know, I don't want artificial hydration, nutrition. I want to be on a ventilator. I want to be intubated, those sorts of things.
At what point should people start to make these decisions? And I'll be honest, for me, it was when I had children. It's
Sure.
like when I have children, it's like, oh, now I need a life insurance policy because I want to make sure they're taken care of, and
Right.
I want to make sure that these decisions are made. So what time frame do you recommend people start thinking about what they're gonna
Certainly
do?
try to get it as early as possible, you know, but it's hard because none of us feel, you know, this imminent desire to put things in place until we have children. You know, that's when it becomes real, or until you start to own a bunch of things, and that when it becomes real. Certainly the earlier the better, but if you're retirement age, about to retire or past retirement age, you got to have these things, because we don't know what could happen. We don't know what
Exactly.
the future holds. None of us have a crystal ball, and until, you know, someone like Elon Musk creates one of those for us, then we need to go ahead and just put the plan in place.
So let's just recap elder law.
Sure.
And what is your recommendation to people? Just give you a call and set
Yeah,
up
I mean,
for,
absolutely. We offer a free consultation for anyone who wants to have these questions answered. We have a lot of really good resources, free resources on our website, mcelderlaw.com. I've written a book, and my law partner, Greg McIntyre, has written a book. Mine's better, by the way, has pictures. But, you know, I recommend going to the website where you can get a copy of the book. You can swing by the office, get a copy of either one of our books. We have a lot of videos where we talk about and break down trust, ladybird deeds, powers of attorney, everything that we've talked about here and more. And we have a lot of really good articles on our website just breaking things down. So, you know, communication is key. Come in, you know, sit down with the attorney. I mean, you can read all you want. You can look at our website. There's nothing like the real thing, though. So
Yeah.
you tell me about what's going on in your life. I can give you good advice, and then we can go from there.
And things can always be updated.
Yeah.
I know, you know, even at my age with what I do have, hopefully I'll have more
Yeah.
by the time I retire. So these things can always be updated. They can
Sure.
always be adjusted. They can always be changed
Right.
anytime.
We offer
Nobody's
a-
setting things in stone.
Absolutely. Any of our clients, they get a free annual review where they can come in and we can review their estate plan for free. Anything that's changed, anything that, you know, needs to be added, that sort of thing. You know, we meet with them, talk about that, and go from there.
This has been great advice. Thank you so
Good.
much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And I encourage everybody to go to the website. I have been on their website and looked at some of the videos, a lot of useful information. If you're helping a family member to plan, or if you're planning yourself, I encourage you to look into your own assets and how to protect those. Thank you for watching Senior Moments, and we'll see you back next time.